The question is that the motion be agreed to. Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Can I firstly, and I'm sure I'm joined by other colleagues on this side of the House by complimenting the Minister on his well-researched dissertation. Obviously he has become somewhat of an expert in this field. I am not, and I'm sure the House, as we proceed through these processes, will look to him to... he's offered to be an expert witness at the Select Committee, sir, as I suspect, without bringing you in the debate, as a firearms user yourself may wish to consider that option. But we look forward to the Minister of Justice appearing before the learned Law and Order Committee. This will be a first. It's difficult enough to get justice officials to appear before the Law and Order Select Committee, even on justice issues. So we're reaching a new level of quality advice that we're going to receive, given the Minister's commitment to appear before us. I'll ensure that the Select Committee issues an invitation forthwith. Can I say, sir, that, and I know it'll be accepted, can I say, sir, that the Labour opposition will support this legislation with one rider, that obviously, given the Select Committee process, we will want to see that this receives a high degree of scrutiny, that it returns back into this House as a practical piece of legislation that will actually do what it is intended to do, that is to allow those folks who are law-abiding citizens to continue to be able to participate in their chosen legal activity or sport, whilst also protecting those who would engage in nefarious activity in respect of the importation of these items. I'm not going to labour the point. I do note the Minister's point that there appears to be a safeguard for legitimate users who are turned down in respect of importation or usage of, or importation of these firearms, MSSAs, to appeal to the District Court. The question I would have over that is whether that, on the one hand, does indeed provide a safeguard, but that is a significant and expensive move that an ordinary Kiwi law-abiding user would have to go through, to appear before the District Court, to appeal to the District Court and hire lawyers et al. At great expense. But I do note that this is about protecting the public interest. I'm sure there will be, and I've seen the blog traffic, as I'm sure other members of Parliament have, from various associations representing firearms users. I know that these organisations will be making submissions, I'm sure, to the Select Committee. And we'll welcome that, because I know firearms issues, and I see my colleague on the Select Committee, Mr Ardern, nodding. They generally come with a reasonable amount of controversy, these issues. I would note a constituent in my electorate, the principal of Wood End School, Graham Barber, who is a collector and user of firearms for legitimate purposes, obviously, in sport, who is quite an authority on these issues, and I would say that he and his organisation, not the school of course, but his rifle club, will make submissions, and obviously we would welcome Mr Barber as an expert in this field to look at these matters. I would just make a couple of points though, that there is a trend that has developed with this government, that legislation in respect of law and order and justice has been wheeled into the House in rather a piecemeal way. I think the point was made, we've sort of leapt from double bunking issues to 3 strikes, although Mr Hyde and Mr Garrett, of course, we've had 1 strike, 2 strikes and 3 strikes, and Mr Hyde is now out. So I suppose that is one benefit in political terms of that legislation. We look forward to him hastening his departure from this chamber. But the legislation in respect of justice matters, there doesn't appear from this government to have been, since they came in, a coherent and coordinated plan around justice matters. There has been a lot of populism, I would say, especially from the ACT Party and the former leader, a lot of populism, as they sort of clasp together with the Sensible Sentencing Trust. But when you're actually looking at the overall issues in respect of justice, that is offending, the prevention of offending, incarceration, rehabilitation, the whole package of goods, there has never been, I think, from this government, apart from populism, and I bundle this into it as well, although I acknowledge this is a practical measure, there has never been a coherent strategy or plan apart from sort of the next populist idea that Rodney Hyde, then David Garrett before he acquiesced under cover of darkness, or some other person in the government actually sort of pulled out, thought that'll grab a nice headline, we'll bang that through, that'll try and get us a couple of points up on the polls. There are some very, very serious issues in the whole criminal justice sector that need to be addressed, especially by that member over there. He would know, of course. He would know indeed. And to bring sort of piecemeal bits of legislation that on one hand are boy races on one hand from the Minister of Police, and then serious pieces of legislation like this doesn't sort of reek of a coherent plan or strategy. It reeks, I think, of sort of the rugged populism which the ACT Party and the National Parties engaged at ad nauseam. I will acknowledge, of course, though, that the Minister of Justice has done a significant amount of work in respect of bringing justice legislation into this House. I'd also acknowledge, that's the positive, I'd acknowledge that the process by which this has been brought to the House, the restrictions on select committee processes, the Law and Order Select Committee not actually being able to get, for instance, corrections advice on corrections bills, justice advice on justice bills, the total abrogation of select committee protocols in respect of submitters, the abuse of parliamentary protocols in terms of members of parliament, select committees, are not being able to put in minority reports, even to have a minority view. That, I take it, is in the past. We have a new chairman of that committee, and to give her credit, she has acted to date in a way that her predecessor never did, in trying to bring, I think, some parliamentary process back to the Law and Order Committee to allow democracy to flow, to allow members to have a fair go, and to allow submitters their right to submit and have an opinion. So I do, in fairness, acknowledge the new chairman of the Law and Order Committee. God help us, it would not take a huge leap of faith to do better than the last chairman that we had. So in essence, we'll support this legislation. I'm sure there will be, as I've said, some controversy and some concern from legitimate users around this. Our view is that that should bubble up on the Select Committee, and those people should be listened to. But at the end of the day, my view is that we have a duty in this House to, on balance, of course, protect those individuals, our community, from those who would do wrong, either violently or in practice, and endanger others from the criminal elements. But also we have to balance that again, which is the role of this House, against those people who are legitimate users in a sporting sense, in a sporting sense, in a hobby sense, that are legal and legitimate users. But at the end of the day, in my view, safety comes first. And we have seen some difficulties that police have had in respect of these firearms. We note that there is uncertainty, and it is the role of this Parliament to clarify in legislative terms any uncertainty that exists. That has to be a good thing for legitimate users and those who are charged to protect our communities, the police. So the Labor Party will support the legislation, but I'm sure I'm joined by the Chair of the Law and Order Committee, we would require and welcome a full and open submission process so that all stakeholders in this sector, if you will, have the opportunity to and have the time to ensure through their contributions that this piece of legislation comes back, is appropriate, is practical in its nature, and gives effect to the aims and objectives that I would have thought at least most parties in the House, maybe some odd ones might take a different view, but most parties in this House would support and accept, and that is the protection of our communities, the protection of our police, and the rights of those folks to act legitimately in their chosen sport or activity.
Jackie Dean.